first came to Abhayagiri Monastery to write a newspaper story about Ajahn. He and the other monks captured me with their openness and kindness of heart. I was intrigued by the monks' deep knowledge of Theravada Buddhism and the strict precepts they lived by. Abhayagiri, which means fearless mountain in the ancient Pali language, is a Buddhist community created for those who want to fully dedicate their lives toward the realization of enlightenment. 12 monks live on Fearless Mountain, deep in the forest in Northern California. I had the thought someone should make a film about Abhayagiri. The contrast between the modern world and the life of the monks living in the forest on alms alone was striking. I thought the monk's simple life might serve as an example for the rest of us. Because basic human nature has not changed, the teachings the Buddha set down more than 2,500 years ago are still relevant in our world today. Abhayagiri creates a peaceful presence and has a strong connection with the local community that supports it. The monks are always willing to share their deep knowledge and experience of mindfulness. One can feel the Buddha's strong presence here, as if he is meditating beneath the trees that cover Fearless Mountain.
There's a saying that people don't really change unless they're forced to. So that's what happened with me. I had enough suffering in my life that I decided I wanted to. I actually never imagined myself becoming a Buddhist monk, but I just got to the point where I hit rock bottom in my life and had to deal with depression, and I was what I did for my love was surfing waves and playing music, and I injured myself, was unable to do the surfing thing, so kind of went into depression and was studying Buddhism at the same time, and that seemed like any sense of well-being I had was dependent on this kind of self I had defined for myself, being a surfer, and so that was challenged, and so I was really just kind of really searching at that point. So I just kind of stumbled upon this place, found it on the internet, and then basically came here for a 1-week stay and was really impressed. It kind of blew away my preconceived idea that monks are really sad people who mull around with big black hoods over their face all day long.
You know, just for the average person in the world, including myself, you know, when I was going to college or before or whatnot, things come up during your day, and if it's fun, you just keep doing it as much as you can or whatnot, and if it's annoying or unpleasant, you try and switch to something else. And there's this kind of the mind state of, well, you know, I have the freedom just to do whatever I want, so that's how you go about your day, just, you know, kind of trying to set up conditions to get things your way or whatnot. But at the monastery, and what we're encouraged to do is when these things come up, instead of trying to get rid of it or have it or get it or keep it or destroy it, we're just supposed to kind of look at it and understand it and see what's going on here. You know, coming to things with the state of mind of, you know, kind of investigating and watching, you know, knowing, instead of, you know, doing and changing. When you come to live in the forest monastery with other monks, and a lot of your action is restrained. You know, you're trying to really restrain from a lot of unwholesome actions and whatnot, so that you can be aware of them without and not, you know, not causing more trouble for yourself and others. And it's kind of like I have a harder time communicating, because I'm used to, you know, communicating with, you know, everybody being my age, or, you know, people that I'm close to, and all the things that we would talk about and knew about, and everything's different now, so you've got to kind of adapt and change, and it takes time. It's like one of our teachers, Ajahn Brahm, he's one of the teachers he lives in Australia. He's the abbot of a monastery in Perth, in Australia, and he was just here visiting for a few days. And the talk he was giving last night was, or one of the things he mentioned in the talk was about, you know, how for example, all the junior monks, they say, like, oh, the senior monks have it so easy. They just sit around all day and they're offered everything and they get taken care of, and they just have to sit around and talk. And us junior monks, we have to do all the hard work, and we have to do all the work and just listen to orders and all that. And but then you know, once the junior monks become senior monks, they say, oh, you know, the junior monks have it so easy. They just have to work on their own and, you know, hang out, and they get all the teachings, and we have to sit around and talk to people all day and solve all their problems and run everything. So it's just trading one thing for another. It's like trading one type of suffering, junior monk suffering for senior monk suffering, and vice versa. And the same thing when you leave. You know, when I left to ordain as a monk, I just left the lay life, suffering from being, you know, at college and a college student and whatnot, to having the suffering of being in a monastery. So you've got to learn to kind of transcend that. You know,
So really, you have to what you're saying is you have to deal with the same emotion as you do in civilian life.
It's just a different scenario, but they're still suffering. But that's the whole point of Buddhism. You can't cling to conditions to support, you know, your welfare or your happiness, your sense of well-being, because all conditions are impermanent and changing and unsatisfactory.
So that brings up the question: what is the difference between being in a monastery and being in college?
Well, the difference is you can the ingeniousness of the Buddha's teaching is you can use the conditioned things. You can use those things that are conditioned, are impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self. You can use those things as a tool to get you to a point where you don't have to rely on those things. So you could say the path of practice is using convention to escape from convention, or, you know, using these things as a tool. So not attaching to things, you know, not attaching to being a monk or living in a monastery, but using it as a tool, using the Buddha's teachings as a tool for liberation.
The Buddha himself certainly used the word suffering a lot, and it's as a perspective for reflection, or as a counterpoint for the aspiration, because the aspiration is always happiness, you know, in terms of human beings want to be happy. We're kind of hardwired to want to experience happiness and well-being. We're looking for it in so many ways. And to recognize that there are ways that are efficacious, and there's ways that actually frustrate our desire for happiness. So that perspective of recognizing, well, yeah, okay, I want happiness, but why do I keep butting my head up against this suffering all the time, or this sense of discontent or dissatisfaction or dis-ease? So that's one thing that as a goal or as a perspective, say the Buddha's teachings emphasize suffering, but also in terms of the actual way of practice, the path that's laid out, all of the constituents of the path are things which lead to happiness. So that, say, the path that is grounded in ethical and virtuous conduct is something that brings us happiness and well-being. The path of meditative awareness and concentration, these help to settle the mind and bring the mind to a point of happiness and well-being, so that you're nurturing happiness all along the way. Wisdom and the ability to discern things in their true light brings a great deal of happiness and delight into the mind, so that the whole path is one that is one is cultivating the factors of happiness and well-being. But the counterpoint that one is using to use as a mirror is this working, is this not working? Is there any discontent, dissatisfaction, dis-ease, suffering that still needs to be worked with? And how do I work with it?
Somebody who's seeking happiness through sort of acquisition will never come to an end of their desires. It just, desire builds on desire. As soon as you get this thing, you want something else. And so the next step is really like learning to see through that, or at least have faith to try to go the other direction and see what effects that has in your life in terms of cultivating more peace of mind and happiness. And sort of just like, I want that, I can feel that I want that in my life, or I want a nicer car, or a better house, or a new iPod, or whatever kind of shiny, glitzy sort of things that are obsessing your mind. And taking a second look at that and questioning, you say, well, I felt like this about that before, didn't I? And this thing and that thing, and here I am just wanting more.
The Buddha's teaching, and particularly his teachings about liberation, revolve very much about breaking the cycle of addiction. He called it dependent origination, how ignorance and craving and suffering are all intrinsically interrelated with each other. The essence of the insight that he had at his enlightenment was into that process. When there's ignorance, it leads to craving, and if craving is pursued, then it always leads to suffering, to unhappiness. If you stop the cycle, if there's no ignorance, if we're really awake to the way life is, then the craving doesn't arise. Maybe there's a feeling of like or dislike, but it doesn't hatch into craving and clinging and pursuing the object, believing that that's the thing, that big deal on the stock exchange, that great, the Pulitzer Prize winning photo, the great novel, or the new car, or that tequila that just it goes down like water, that hits the spot and makes me feel great. That there's no, regardless of what the object might be, you can see that even if there's a feeling of attraction or interest, then it's not picked up, it's not pursued. It's like, yeah, well, that's attractive. Yes, when you get praise, when you win the big prize, that's very sweet, but I don't have to live for that. I don't have to make that the center of my world. If the prize comes, great. If it doesn't come, that's fine too. So no suffering ensues from that. So that was the insight that the Buddha had, not particularly about tequila and stock options, but that was on the night of his enlightenment. He saw how those things are connected. If the mind is truly awake, then there's no suffering. As soon as we don't see things clearly, as soon as there's ignorance, not knowing the way things are, then the mind drifts into the tokens of transcendence made by money or oblivion or thrill, excitement of sexual nature or material possessions or of social status, whatever it might be. Those become tokens of transcendence, that having money equals I'm a person of substance, I now have, I am. And then when they fail to deliver complete happiness, then dukkha, suffering, kind of comes from that. There's never been a particularly strong monastic tradition in America. I mean, most people, the only monastics they would meet would be the the nuns that teach in Catholic school. And but for most people in Europe, when people see you dressed in robes like this, then they automatically assume you're some kind of a monastic. That there's a recognition of the renunciate principle. And in countries like Ireland, even when you explain, well, actually, no, we're Buddhists, we're not Christian, you know, and we're nothing to do with the Pope or with the Catholic Church, they sort of nod and say, oh yeah, you know, right, I understand. And then, so which church do you belong to then? You know, that you've got to be some kind of a Catholic, you know. But they don't really care when you try and explain, no, the Buddha lived 500 years before Jesus, but not connected to the Christian Church at all. It's like, well, so what? You know, you're some kind of a monk. And so that they're interested in you, they're inspired by you, or they want to connect with you because you're representing something of that archetype. And the details of the theology are sort of by the way. And even when, you know, like living in England, we've had monasteries there since the late 70s, so nearly 30 years now. Even for like local people and, you know, farmers around the area, when we would have our retreat time for 3 months and we wouldn't go out on the alms round, because we walked through the lanes, the pathways and the country lanes around the monasteries, going on alms round most of the year. And then, you know, in the springtime, often the farmers say, where were you? We didn't see you all winter. Where you been? You know, they have no particular interest in Buddhism or have not studied it, but just the sight of nuns or monks walking through the fields, along the pathways, down the lanes, that touches people, that affects people. There's something that is moved by that recognizes, oh, this is to do with the spiritual life. And that, and maybe that's a little bit weaker in America because of the particular history of the white community in this country in the last 250 years, 300 years. But it's still there, I think, within the human heart. It's like in the Buddha's story, the four, what are called the four heavenly messengers that made him leave the life of a prince and the life of luxury and take up the life of a religious seeker. You know, the first four the first three were an old person, a sick person, and a dead body, a corpse on its way to the funeral, being carried to the funeral. But the fourth one was a religious seeker, like a wandering monk. And that was the one, the fourth one was the one that said, you know, that caused the Buddha to realize, I can do this. You know, there's a way to understand the nature of human life and perhaps this path of renunciation. Because he asked his charioteer, well, you know, what's this fellow doing with the dreadlocks and the long beard and the brown robe? He said, oh, he's a religious seeker. He's in search of the deathless reality. That's what yogis, that's what religious seekers do. They commit their lives to awakening to ultimate truth. And then that was the spark then that caused the Buddha to recognize, yeah, that's the only really important thing to me, even above my, you know, the kingdom and the family and even his wife and child. That he said that if I really want to fulfill my life and do the best that I can for them, as well as the world, then this is a path I can take. And so that caused him to leave the household life. So that what you're doing as a monk also is you're flying the Buddhist flag. You know, you're playing that role in a way of the fourth heavenly messenger, of the renunciant. And it's so many times, you know, people, they haven't got a clue what you are. I've had people that come up to me in the train station in London, just waiting for a train, and a complete stranger says, I want to thank you for doing what you're doing.
I think in terms of you know, taking Theravada Buddhism as its say what is its core characteristic, And it would be the focus on practice and training and trying to follow the teachings of virtue, of developing of meditation, and the cultivation of wisdom. So those are the central sort of bits that are down from the Buddha's time that followed the path that he laid out in his first teaching. Because in the very first teaching that the Buddha gave, he outlined those four basic truths that he was pointing to of the unsatisfactoriness of ordinary existence, that there's a cause to that dissatisfaction, being various types of desire and attachment, that there is an ending, there is a cessation of that. One can be liberated from that sense of dissatisfaction, and there is a path leading to that liberation. There is a path of training. It isn't something that is bestowed on one or that one beseeches from something external. It's something that you cultivate yourself, relying on the teachings, relying on the example of the Buddha himself and the successive generations, and it's the communities that one lives and practices with, and it revolves around that cultivation of virtue, having a moral foundation or a foundation of virtue and goodness, a basis of calm, clarity, steadiness of mind, concentration, that peacefulness of heart, and then the aspects of wisdom that are understanding clearly just what's the true nature underlying things that we experience, what's its basic characteristic. As one sees that clearly, then there's a radical letting go, a radical freeing of the heart.
When I first got interested in Buddhism, I had this kind of fuzzy notion of what enlightenment was, like most of us do. And it's some huge, grand thing that we can't quite get our minds around. But what drew me to practice more than that sort of grand idea was the sense of just wanting to make my life better and learn how to live in a way that's happy and peaceful. As I came to study the teachings more, the Buddha's definition of what enlightenment is seems more realistic, which is, learning how to eliminate suffering in our lives and live in a way that we don't suffer anymore. And instead of searching for this kind of mind-exploding event or some sort of great sense of bright light dawning in the middle of our meditation experience, it's really well defined and focused on learning how we suffer and create heaviness in our life, and learning to live in a way where that doesn't arise. And that's really good because it shifts the focus of the practice from looking for some big experience into basically like learning how to mature spiritually. And the path then isn't seeking this peak experience, even though you can think of it as a peak experience because it's such a momentous accomplishment. But it's more focused on what he taught over and over throughout the 45 years he taught it, and he refers to it as the gradual path. So, it starts very much just sort of learning how to be a generous and selfless person rather than a selfish person who's miserly and trying to get more out of life and accumulate more for me. And right there you see how that starts to work on selfishness and the kind of contraction of self and identity, which is at the heart of the problem. And as one develops in generosity, quite naturally one would develop more of an interest in how morality, or setting sort of certain wise limits up on our life, would help further that process along and also eliminate problems. It shouldn't take much of an argument to convince somebody that if you refrain from doing things that inherently put us in contention with others, ourself, and society, that there's going to be less stress. You know, if you refrain from killing people, you refrain from lying and stealing and sexual misconduct, your life just gets a whole lot lighter, a whole lot simpler. There's a lot less conflict internally and externally.
So the ceremony that we'll be doing is what's called a patimokkha, and it's the recitation of the monk's rules of training. And so that the monk's rules of training, there's a body of precepts, about 227. So it's substantial, and it really does cover all of the areas of our life. So it's really the training of how we live our day-to-day life as spiritual practitioners. And on a fortnightly basis, on the full moons and the new moons, then the community gathers and they do a recitation of the rules of training. So that this is something that was set up at the time of the Buddha, so that the communities had a focal point, and the coming together with how you live your life. And this is a time when you also do, say before you enter the ceremony, then you'll do a confession of any transgressions that have taken place in the previous 2 weeks. So it's like clearing off any offenses according to the discipline. Then you do the recitation, everybody listening to the rules. It's more of a formal ceremony because it's actually done in the scriptural language. One monk will recite it, and then the rest of the community comes together to listen to it. But it's something that the Buddha set up so that any community that comes together, that's living together, that is something that if you're in the community, then it's something you have to participate in.
I was with this couple, Mark and Nancy, and we got a phone call one night from this man, Daniel, who I had met in England. And he said he was really keen to start a monastery in California. And were we interested? He wanted to know if all three of us were interested, Mark, Nancy, and myself. And that's kind of how it started. We arranged a meeting, and there was a group of 6, and we got together to discuss it, and then it just kind of took off from there. We didn't have anything when we started, and we just had good intention. And so a small group put in the kernel, the seed money, so to speak. And it's been a lot of work, and we've made some mistakes along the way. And then, you know, you get a piece of land and you have ideas when there's only 3 monks total. And you have ideas about what you're going to need and how you can use the land. And we had to present our use permit package to the county to get a change of use. So we kind of had to imagine the future to come up with that design. And I think we did pretty well, but we had no idea it would grow as quickly as far as interest. They have to turn people away because there's just not enough room by the design of our use permit, which we designed. Everything's in phases. There's 4 phases, and that involves what buildings go up and when. And then that the number of people that can be here as residents is tied into what buildings are present and the facilities in place.
We're going to be also building another regular kuti just down the trail, and that one won't have all the bathroom facilities. It'll just be a single room, like most of ours are, and we'll build that one in conjunction with a contractor, so that we'll have a lead carpenter, and he will supervise and provide us with the guidance about how to do it, and then we'll pitch in most of the labor. And do the actual, nuts and bolts construction of it all. So those kinds of things we can do if we have somebody making sure that we're staying to code.
So is the monastery expanding? Are there going to be more monks?
Well, we have a waiting list. We've had a waiting list for years now. Usually at this point in time it's around 1 to 2 years for people who are interested in taking on ordination, because we can only usually take on maybe at the most 2 people a year because of our limited facilities. So adding some more of these cabins will enable us to be able to take on more people.
My name is Steve Hawley.
And what is your relationship with the monasteries?
I live in the neighborhood.
Oh, so you're a neighbor?
Yeah.
Ah. And are you a Buddhist, or are you?
I would say I'm studying and trying to absorb the practice of Buddhism, yes. And what I'm doing, what makes me feel good about being near the monastery is I have a large organic vegetable garden, which I, on a weekly basis, bring vegetables to the monastery. So I feel like, it's hard to explain, but that just makes me feel happy in a very basic way. It's just a simple thing. I go on a sunny morning, harvest some vegetables, put them in a basket, bring them up here, and then they make a meal for the monks. So that's enough meaning for me in my life.
That's terrific. So, so you're not really involved in the spiritual.
Oh yes, I am.
Oh, you are as well.
Oh yeah, but I'm not ready to put on robes or anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been coming to the monastery about 2 years. Actually, Memorial Day 2 years ago, I came for a long weekend.
Oh really?
And I've been coming ever since. off and on. I'm here now for 2 weeks.
And where are you from?
I live down in San Francisco, in the city,
Are you ready to move in and take the robes?
Not quite yet, but I definitely, being here inspires you to practice more and more. It's just difficult in the modern Western world to allot the time for it. So,
Unless you allot all your time.
that's it, right? There's that point. Well, that's a big cliff, right? It's not like you could just ease into it if you have a full-time job. You have to make the break.
So what attracted you to Buddhism?
Variety of things. I was raised Catholic, and I always had an interest in spirituality. I was actually very inspired, by Thomas Merton. He was a Trappist monk, so monasticism has always actually kind of interested me. And I had a lot of death in my life. My parents passed away when I was relatively young. Lost some other people closer to me, so it's kind of an incentive to find out about life and death and suffering.
And have you found the answers in Buddhism?
I think I found more relevant questions to ask. Perhaps not answers, but more gratifying ways of exploring life.
What has the practice done for you in a practical sense? I mean, how has it changed your life?
Well, I was just talking to Ajahn Pasano a little bit ago that just paying attention to what's present, being more mindful in the moment, and noticing when craving and aversion show up. I had 9 surgeries by the time I was 23 and had a lot of chronic pain, and there were a couple of retreats where I was in tears because of the pain, but even more of the pain and suffering was because of my aversion to the pain. So what we do with what we're given in life sometimes creates more suffering than the actual, reality of what's going on.
So you're a long-time Buddhist?
I am.
Wow.
30 years.
Wow.
Long.
So are you there yet?
Where's there? There is here. I came here for a week, and then I was hooked.
When was that?
3 years ago.
So you've been hooked for a long time.
Yeah.
What happened that hooked you? What was the experience of being hooked?
I just felt like it's hard to explain. I just felt like there's something here. At the time I couldn't really tell, what is it that drawn me here, but it was just a feeling of coming home, just like, oh wow, finally I feel like, this is a place where I want to spend a lot of time and learn more about myself.
See, I'm not a hysteric about this spiritual path. I know it's for me, but I don't have a conversion hysteria where I've rejected every facet of my old life, so to speak. And so I'm just trying to make some gradual transition into more of a Buddhist lifestyle. I can't imagine, now that I've been around monasteries for a couple of years, I can't imagine living somewhere where there wasn't a monastery. I'd feel something was wrong.
Something out of the ordinary took place at the monastery on the 7th of May 2005. 9-year-old Todd Tansuhaj was the youngest boy ever to be ordained a novice monk at Abhayagiri. The ordination took place because of a set of extraordinary circumstances.
You had to practice chanting, right? Yep. For how many months? 6 months?
Yeah, 6 months.
Oh, wow. So you must be very good.
Kind of. I'm still getting one thing wrong.
But he has to go to school full time. So the practice is only
half time.
Not half time. It was once a week for a while, right, Todd?
And then it goes twice a week, then thrice a week, then twice a week, then I'm not making any sense, am I?
The adopted son of Chusak and Patriya Tansuhaj has a rare blood disorder that makes his future difficult and uncertain. Patriya and her husband, who emigrated from Thailand 20 years ago, felt it was important that Todd was raised to be a good Buddhist. So on a trip back to her native Thailand, Patriya visited some forest monasteries. While at Wat Nang Papong Monastery in northeastern Thailand, she first learned of Abhayagiri. It impressed her to see Western monks committed to following the strict Theravada tradition of alms mendicants. Once the family heard that Abhayagiri followed the teachings of the Venerable Ajahn Chah, they felt they had found their spiritual home in America. They often drove 2 long days from their home in Washington State to listen to Dhamma talks. Ordination is not something to be taken lightly. Preparation, even to become a novice monk, usually takes a full year or more of diligent practice. So the Tansuhaj family continued preparations at home. Todd readied himself beyond what his parents expected. He realized that he would have to make a real commitment to the practice, and he memorized almost all the chanting, something difficult even for an adult. Todd is a breath of fresh air for the monks at Abhayagiri. He adds a natural childlike quality to the normally serene atmosphere of the monastery. Ajahn Pasano explains that Todd's ordination is very much a traditional practice. In Buddhism, it is recommended for someone going through a transition to do something meritorious and skillful.
So you can bow 3 times. Okay, slowly. And you can offer the tray of offerings. Come closer. Come closer. Come closer. Okay. Okay, now you can come up onto your knees and then your hands in Anjali. Let's begin the Okasa. Okasa Vandami Bante is the, okay?
When Todd leaves the monastery, he will be going through medical treatment with an uncertain outcome. But Todd's parents know his time spent at Abhayagiri was priceless.
Papa Jang De Tat Me Bante. Okay. Making the request, this is something that you want to do. You're not forced by your parents to do it. Yeah.
Do I do that?
Now you can do the Sambaduka. Kahetawa. Okay, just go slow. Papa Jeta.
Patriya feels that the overriding principle at the monastery is compassion for fellow human beings. She says that what makes the monks on Fearless Mountain special is that instead of going by the book, they follow their hearts.
You can put your right hand here, okay, like that, okay. For the end of the ceremony, what I'll do is give you your Samanera name, a Pali name that is for your ordination name. If you come a bit closer, okay. There you go. And you can. I put it on a card so you can keep it in the future. I've named you Piyasilo, which is one. In English, we say one with endearing virtue, or ผู้มีศีลน่ารัก มาลากันทะวิเลพนะธารณมันดนะวิบูสนฐานาเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิมาลากันทะ Okay, you can bow 3 times. Okay, you did great, Todd.
That took a long time, so I had to go to the bathroom now.
Okay.
Before we can develop and cultivate awareness, we have to recognize it. So you might like the idea, but do you really know what it is? And do you really trust it? And so in this, in the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, this is an exploration of, that this was the first sermon the Buddha, after his enlightenment. The first sermon is called the Dhammacakka Pavattana Sutta, and this is the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. Well, if you develop, use this teaching, not as something to grasp and analyze or think about, but apply it to the present moment, like suffering or the causes of suffering. So you begin to explore, investigate, the suffering, the feeling of insecurity, of confusion, or loneliness, or incompleteness, or anger, or greed, or jealousy, or fear, and strong emotions, or just feeling despair and hopeless, loneliness, boredom, depression. So it's like, recognize it's like this. Feeling despair is like this. Or grief, or anxiety. And so it's opening to it. It's not trying to get rid of it or analyze it, but recognize it. Allow it to be fully conscious. And allowing anything to be fully conscious, you then can let go of it. So in the second noble truth is the awareness of letting go, the insight into letting go, because the delusions we have are around identity, attachment to desire, ignorance, avijja, or ignorance of these Four Noble Truths. So by taking these Four Noble Truths and applying them to experience here and now, this is a skillful means, this is a language, this is a upaya that is not meant as an end in itself, but as a means towards looking at the reality of this moment in a way you might never think of otherwise, unless you had such a teaching. So it's taking suffering, which is the most ordinary human experience you can ever conceive of, isn't it? Everybody suffers. Everybody. Suffering has not changed that much from the time of the Buddha to present time. It's still grief, sorrow, despair, and anguish, old age, sickness, death, loss of the love, not getting what you want, not liking what you have. I mean, it's all the same. This the Buddha pointed out 48 years ago.
Well, the answer is that people haven't changed that much. That people in the time of the Buddha experienced happiness and unhappiness, success and failure, gain and loss, good fortune and bad fortune. People were still born, they had babies, they still had their childhood and their adolescence, their youth, their adulthood, their old age, their death. They still experienced happiness at getting what they liked and unhappiness at losing what they liked. The radical experiences of the human world are still the same. The sun still comes up in the morning, the moon still follows exactly the same patterns as it did in the Buddha's time. The the rising of wisdom and goodness and virtue, and greed, hatred, and delusion. They ain't changed much. You know, the basic experiences are fundamentally the same, and so that, and the basic problems of life, the spiritual problems of life, I say, are still the same. I mean, people can often argue, yeah, but you know, the pace of life now is so much greater, and they do these neat calculations, like say, you know, 150 years ago, you know, a person would experience in the space of 18 months, they would have to process the amount of information in 18 months that now an ordinary urban dweller has to process in 24 hours, in terms of actual concepts arrived or novelties to be digested. So this is different. This makes everything different. And in a way, it to some extent it does. And we're not denying that or saying that there are probably unique difficulties that come with the modern age. But when you dig a little bit deeper, you find that, well, yeah, but even in the time of the Buddha, you had the mountain people, you had the plains people, you had the intellectuals, you had the unlettered farmers, you had, you know, a vast range of people with different influences. You had the politicians, and you had the yogis. There's you know, big range of different subjects and people, and yet one of the things that's notable about many religious scriptures, I think the Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, is that they're relevant to everybody. They're not just relevant to the poor farmers or to the powerful nobles or to the intellectuals or to the mothers. You know, the truly universal teachings are universal because they're relevant to everybody. And so, also because of the kind of organic system that you have with Buddhist tradition, that, you know, it's not proselytized, it's not pushed, that if it had become useless, no one would be interested in it.
Well, I think as a monk in the modern world, I think it's really important, especially as Theravada, which is so clearly kind of ancient. These robes, the style is all very what was prescribed, or as close as we can tell, during the Buddha's time. And I think one of the things is bringing an archetype to the West, an archetype of a spiritual seeker.
Just on a practical level, people find it speaks to their lives, that there are lessons contained there that do make a difference, that help us to live more skillfully and make a better job of being alive and functioning as a human being, to make us able to, you know, live more easily and fully as human beings and to find real peace and stability in life. That's why the interest is there. It's not because people have been told that. You know, it's because they've been able to find that for themselves. So it's driven from the interest of the individual, not from a big promotion campaign that's promising, you know, your life will be better, you know, if you do this. And people have just bought the promise. But it's more that people have found some of the information, they've started to apply it, they've developed an interest, there's an appeal that has arisen, and so then they're following it up from there. So, you know, and personally, that's one of the reasons, one of the qualities that drew me to Buddhism in the first place was that, you know, if it works, use it. If it doesn't work, fine, dump it. And that it's it's up to you as an individual. You are the final arbiter of truth as an individual. You decide. You see for yourself. Does it work? Is it useful? Does it make my life better? If it doesn't, fine. Leave it. If it does, great. Use it. It's freely available.
I think that's one of the problems we all have to face, and is just we're conditioned to be discontented. You know, the society, capitalist societies are, you know, to be discontented. You know, you can't. The economy would crash if we were all contented. You have to make people very discontented. Even if they have the best, it's still not good enough. So the monastic presence is also, a sign of contentment, but not a kind of stupid resignation to mediocrity, or not. But it's a contentment because you know you don't need very much really. When you really look at yourself, that you don't need to spend your life just trying to make money and create this false sense of security. And then by the time you're old and dying, you kind of missed your opportunity. See it as, what is necessary for life, what is important. We need food, shelter, clothing, and medicine for illness. We need to, in order to hear the Dhamma and restrain ourselves physically, to take responsibility for how we live in the world. The sila practice of, taking on responsibility of our actions and speech, how we use our ability to speak and what we do with our bodies in the society we're living in, so that we're not creating division or complications or exploiting, misusing, abusing other people, our own bodies, or the environment. No, it's a respect for the environment, for the natural conditions, for the rights of others, for the animal world, for everything. It's a respectful practice and being responsible. We can, take responsibility for how we live in this society. And then the ability to meditate is breaking through the illusions that we're conditioned with, the cultural conditioning. Mindfulness brings us to, gets us beyond even the cultural conditioning. Awareness has no quality other than awareness. It is not a culture, it doesn't belong to any religion, it's not male or female, it's not Buddhist. It's natural, it's here and now. And as we recognize it, awaken, and it's merely through the ability to pay attention, to open. I say open it in this kind of wide way, not looking at something particular, but recognizing just this state of attentiveness, of poised receptivity in the present that includes everything, both the pleasant, painful, wanted and unwanted. So then this is the way out of suffering. This is the path. This is the gate to the deathless, to ultimate reality, to liberation, to freedom. So I offer this as a reflection for this evening.